This week, I need to set the scene of an old temple inside an ancient elven ruin that my players' characters have decided to enter. It's going to be an interesting process because I don't quite know what I'm doing yet, but I figured it would be a good thing to document. Fingers crossed, we come up with something cool. Let's jump into it. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. My name is Garmin. This is the Storycraft Society, and like I said in the intro, this week we are going to be setting up an old temple inside of an ancient elven ruin. So without going into a huge, ginormous lore dump, the elves in my setting come from the Feywild. I think that's common in a lot of settings, but they are descendant of the Eladrin, or as in my setting, they're called the Scathshay. And the Scathshay worship the Archfey much like the mortals do the gods. So what I really want this to imply is a time when the Scathshay had made it to the material plane, but they hadn't started to assimilate quite yet into mortal society. So there's going to be temples to the Archfey here, but the Scathshay were immigrants to this land, and at the time of this particular temple's construction, the old gods were still in control, and they would have been jealous of the Scathshay as they worshipped their Archfey. So they needed this to be secret, hidden, underground. With that said, the Archfey that was being worshipped in this temple was the Old Wood. And what the dogma of the Old Wood is basically like the first tree, the first seed. And supposedly, at least the Scathshay believe that that goes back to the Feywild. So with all that lore dump said, the first thing that I got to do is get my dungeon tiles set up in a pleasing and interesting way. I'm not exactly sure what that's going to look like yet, but hopefully there's a time lapse rolling and you can see me kind of playing around with ideas, and then I will check back in with you once I have something that I like, and I'll start to explain my thought process behind it. So to get this whole thing started off, I started with one of my terrain boards. This is just a piece of foam core board that I put felt on top of and then little grippy feet on the bottom of. Any of you who have worked with foam dungeon tiles know that they are very, very light. And I found that with the exception of like magnets or something where you're actually putting something into the tiles, the felt seems to just grip the bottom of the tile pretty well. But I moved on to setting up two different types of dungeon tiles. The first type that I used was my cave tiles. If you would like to check out the video on how I made those, I will link that down in the description below, alongside my low-walled dungeon tiles. Now, I just absolutely love these because it does not interrupt sight lines, but it still lets your players know where walls are. The next thing that I did was I started to build the area up, and what I knew was that there was going to be kind of like a grove section in the very center where the altar is. Then that's going to all be surrounded by the elven stonework of the castle, so then that's the whole way around. And then I also knew that there were two entrances into this particular temple. The first one is going to be where my players came from. They opened up a secret door in the alchemist's workshop that they found it here. The next one is going to be the way that is technically the right way in, which is also through a secret door, but that's going to be over here. And I expected that the players would come in through the main secret entrance, I guess, but that's just not how the game goes. So since they are coming in over there, they're going to be very close to that center grove. The next thing that I need to do is start getting this thing to look like a temple to the Old Wood. There needs to be trees. So not only specifically trees, but I also need Feywild trees. And in my Feywild, the sun doesn't shine down on it. It's a totally different plane of existence. So trees from the Feywild do not need sunlight to grow. So that's going to be the first clue for my players to know that these trees are not from the material plane. They are not natural in that way. But I'm going to start putting trees of different colors from different seasons all around. That way, again, it implies my Feywild, where there is the Summerlands and the Winterlands, both of which also have the Spring Court and the Fall Court. So you're going to see all different types of trees in all different types of seasons. Once I get that all set up, I think then the next move is going to be to put doors in place. And again, from there, I think what I'll do is I'll check back in with you and we'll see what kind of scatter terrain we need to start putting around to get this place looking absolutely old forest-y. So after putting out all of my trees, I decided it would be a good idea to also put out some of my giant mushrooms. That feels very Fey-wildy, and it definitely gives off that very fairy vibe, which I super, super love. The other thing that is very important that I did was I pulled out my old wood throne, which is a piece that I made forever ago. Actually, it would be probably pretty neat for me to make a tutorial on how to make one here on the channel, but it's basically a giant tree stump with a throne in it, and that will make for an absolutely fantastic altar piece. The one thing that I did make sure to do while I was doing all of my trees like this is to make sure that I left a twisting and meandering path the whole way through. That's going to be a good place for minis to go during the fight, and it kind of implies a direction where the characters should be and where they should be going. The next thing that I really need to do is I need to get something that fills the space a little more than just the bases of my trees. So what I think I'm gonna do is pull out a package of reindeer moss, and I'm gonna see if I can tuck that in and around the bases of the trees to make it look like undergrowth. I think this should work. And then once I get that done, I think I'm gonna be pretty close to having this build finished and ready for my players. But I think that about wraps it up for this build. I did throw a couple of doors in over on this side. That's just to separate that extra corridor. But otherwise, this is what I have. Actually, I didn't end up using a whole lot of scatter terrain, which is interesting for a build like this. Typically, I feel like I do want to use a lot of scatter terrain, but really it was just the trees, and then the reindeer moss really filled all of the gaps for me. But hopefully you enjoyed watching this video as much as I enjoyed making it. I cannot wait to unleash this onto my players. This next session is going to be epic, and I just can't wait for it. But that's with almost all of my games with my Thursday crew. Every week is just a different adventure. That actually wasn't meant to be funny, but a different adventure and a different kind of joy. So with that said, if you want to support the channel, there's a lot of ways that you can do it. Very simply, you can subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, or like this video if you liked it. Those all help the channel out a ton. If you want to help the channel in more financial ways, we have merch. I'll have that linked in the description below. But the number one way that you can help out a small YouTube channel is to share their videos with a friend that you think would enjoy it. So if you think you have a friend that would love to see a build like this, please do not hesitate to share that with them. It would go a long way, and I would appreciate it so, so much. So until next week, I think that's it. So until then, I'll be seeing you.